Hello, and welcome to a new video in the Java Basics course brought to you by the FTC Robotics team, ToborTech. In today's video, we will be talking about for loops, which is a very important concept in Java programming. So let's get started. Before we get started talking about for loops, let's first review what we learned about while loops in the last video of this course. While loops, we know, are repetitive, and they repeat some actions while a condition is true. A very common task involving loops is doing something a certain number of times. So if we know the exact number of times we want to run some code, we can write a program like this. So we have an int variable called I with an initial value of 1. While this variable is less than 4, we're going to do these two things. First, print out the value of I, and then we'll increment I by 1, so I++. So if I copy this program into our code editor, we should see 1, 2, and 3 printed out. Loop running 1, loop running 2, loop running 3. Three most important parts of this while loop we need to pay extra attention to for this lesson is, first of all, this line. So int I is equal to 1. We're making a loop control variable, I, and setting it to 1 before the loop. And then we have the condition, which involves the loop control variable being a certain thing. In this case, it's less than 4. So while this condition is true, we will run the loop. Lastly, we have the modification of the loop control variable, so I++. We're incrementing I by 1. This use of loops is so frequently seen that we have a type of loop specially dedicated just to this task. For loops can be used when exactly how many times a loop should run is known. And sometimes we as programmers don't know this, but the computer can either know or compute this value. So the while loop that we saw above can be simplified into a more compact for loop form. So we have this part, let's worry about that in just a moment, and then we have a pair of curly brackets inside of which we have the code we want to run each time the loop runs. Now let's take a look at this part. This is the important part of a for loop. So we write for and then a pair of parentheses. Inside are three expressions. Firstly, we have int I is equal to 1. This is the initialization code. So we're putting this part of our program into this parentheses, int I is equal to 1. This is going to initialize the loop control variable, and it is done once before entering the loop. Secondly, after a semicolon, we have the condition. So in the while loop, this is inside of this parentheses, I is less than 4. In the for loop, this is going to be inside of the parentheses in the second part. So this is the termination condition, which really should be called the running condition. It's the condition under which the loop will continue to run. And it is evaluated after each time the loop runs. Lastly, we have the change. So we're going to change the loop control variable I by some action. We're going to change it somehow so that it's going to be modified. And it is also done each time the loop runs. So let's take a look. If I copy this code into our editor, we should see the same output. We should see 1, 2, and 3 again. So we can see this is indeed the output. So what happened was the program is going to first run this code. Int I is equal to 1. We're making a variable I equal to 1. And then it's going to check, is this I less than 4? It is. Therefore, it's going to run line 4 right here. It's going to print out loop running 1. And then it's going to do I++. It's going to do the change, changing I by 1. And then it will check is I less than 4? It is. So it's going to continue to run line 4, do the change, go back to check, is it still true? If it is, it will continue to repeat. If it's not, the loop will end. So a semicolon is required after the initialization and termination statements. So right here and again right here. We also have some more examples of using for loops down below. So the loop control variable can also be declared out of the loop. So here we're doing the declaration and the initialization in the loop. We can do the declaration outside and the initialization in here. So int num right here, num is equal to 5 right here. So this program will give us the output of, it should be 5, 4, and 3. So 5, 4, and 3. And so num is being decremented this time instead of incremented. It's decreasing every time the loop runs. Next, the termination and the change expressions can also be more interesting. So in this program, j is less than j squared minus 1. While this condition is true, we'll print out j and then increment it by 1. So you don't really need to know what the output of this program is, but just know that you can also make these expressions more interesting. It can be whatever you want, and we get -3, -2, -1 this time. Now here we have the change expression k plus equals to 3. And by the way, you can also use the multiplication equals, or the divide equals, or the modulus equals, etc. So let me copy this code just to show you that this works as well. So this time, k will be added by 3. So 0 changed to 3, changed to 6, and then 9. Now, let's practice what we learned about for loops by writing a for loop, and then calculate the sum of the whole numbers between 1 and 10. So 1 plus 2 plus 3, and adding all the numbers to 10. So take a few moments to write this program, and then come back to this video when you're done. This is just one possible program you can write. So we have int sum is equal to 0. This is going to keep track of the total sum of our calculation. So for each number, for int I is equal to 1, while I is less than 11, we will increment sum by the current number. So if it's 1, we're going to add sum by 1. If I is currently 2, we'll add sum by 2. We will do this as long as I is less than 11. And after each time, we'll increment it by 1. So let me copy this program into our editor, and we'll get 55, which you can verify by hand calculation or calculator, whatever you would like. We also have another possible program with a different termination condition. So in addition of using I is less than 11, we can also write I is less than or equal to 10. So this loop will run the same way as above, because I being less than or equal to 10 is, in this case, the same as I being less than 11. So let's copy this code into our editor, and we should see 55 printed out once again. So 55. Loops. We learned about while loops, the do while loop, and the for loop today. These are incredibly important parts of programming and are very useful in writing programs. The concepts that you learned regarding loops in this chapter will definitely be very helpful to you in writing better Java programs. And that's it for this video about for loops in Java programming. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section. If you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing to our channel down below. And with that said, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in another video.